For me, when I trade, I use the margin account. I only trade on cash.
The stock market has been viewed as a hedge.
Hello and welcome to Streetwise Economics. I'm so excited to present to you yet another exciting podcast episode. And today I have an exciting and very interesting guest, Rufaro Hozheri. Rufaro Hozheri is currently pursuing his Master of Business Administration at Michigan State, and he has worked in multiple roles as a financial analyst in Zimbabwe, where he studied and completed his master's degrees as well. And on this podcast, we discussed about his experience currently in the United States as a graduate student, but also other wide-ranging topics, including investing in the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange and other investment opportunities around the world. More importantly, I also discuss with him his career insights and also what he has in store for the next couple of years. I hope you enjoy this podcast episode. Hello and welcome to the podcast. I have the pleasure of welcoming Rufaro Hozheri, and I am talking to you, and you're currently in Michigan. Welcome to the podcast, Rufaro.
Thank you for having me, Isaac.
Fantastic. So I'm so excited. First of all, tell me, how is the weather in Chicago?
I'm loving it. I'm loving it. You know what they say. It's way colder. Later on, but for now, I think it's not that different from the weather that I'm used to from back home. So for now, I think it's still fine.
Yes.
Yeah. The only difference is, I'm used to it getting dark around 6 at
Yes.
most, but sometimes it stretches here to 10 p.m. I think that's the only difference.
But the sun is still, you can still see the sun.
Yeah, absolutely. But so far, so good.
That's fantastic. So Rufaro and I, we originally, come from Zimbabwe. And Rufaro, you studied at National University of Science and Technology, that is in Zimbabwe, and you are currently pursuing your Master of Business Administration at Michigan State. So tell us a little bit more about your story, and congratulations on that milestone.
Thank you. So I think my background is in finance. Like you rightly said, I did my undergrad at Rust, Zimbabwe in finance. Graduated in 2021. And I've worked as a financial analyst and as an equity research analyst for about the past 2 years before eventually coming to this school. But on the side, I've also done my masters from Midland State University back home, MSU.
Yeah.
And the funny thing, I'm also with Michigan State University, and the nickname is MSU.
MSc.
So yeah,
And you did the masters in financial.
I did financial economics and investment. Yeah. And on the other side, I've been pursuing the CFA as well. So
Chartered Financial Institute.
yeah. So I'll be sitting for the level 3 exam of the CFA program.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's basically me. I mean, it's been basically sitting on the desk most of the time. Either it's school, either it's research and analysis, but I've been behind the desk for pretty much the bigger part of my adult life.
Those are very big accomplishments, and I'm sure the return on education is very, very high. I can attest to that. So
Thank
I
you.
wish you the best on all those. And now tell me about your story. You grew up in Zimbabwe, and now you are currently studying in the US. For some who may be wondering, like, is it possible? Can you tell us about your journey?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you. And I think that's a very beautiful question. And the reason why I say that, I feel like there are a lot of people qualified to come here and further their education in the US who simply are not doing so because they don't know how to do it. And viewers of your podcast might benefit from that.
Yes.
So, like I mentioned, I had my undergrad. So funny enough, when I was in my final year, I met this guy who told me that, do you know that you can actually go to the US and you can end up working for these big investment banks, your Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan.
Yes.
At that time, I just felt like, this guy is just telling me things. Yeah, absolutely. So he told me that what I had to do is I had to do my CFA as soon as possible. Then I will leverage my CFA into applying these top universities in the world, and from there I can easily move to the investment banks.
Yes.
Yeah. So basically, what I can say is you don't necessarily need to use CFA to do that, but as long as you've got a good profile, you can leverage your good profile into applying into these universities, be it in the US, in the UK, wherever you are interested in. And sometimes we undercut ourselves because we just feel like when we're back home, I
Yes.
probably don't have that profile that
Yes.
that will make them accept me or enroll me into the program. But you'll be amazed some of the things that you've done and accomplished. Just the mere fact that you have completed the 4 year degree, and even the fact that you have worked after and you have done something in your work, it's really beautiful. So one thing that I would recommend anybody who's trying to come to the US is to do. There is an exam called the GMAT. That's a
Yes.
very important exam that you need to sit for. I leveraged the CFA. I didn't have to take the GMAT, but if I had to do it over again, I would have set for the GMAT because it becomes very handy when it comes to funding. And it's probably something that we'll talk about later in the
Yes.
podcast. Funding is very important. And when you're coming from a background like mine, usually you don't have the money that it takes because education here is very expensive.
Yes.
So you need to get as much funding as possible. And what I've realized, at least from my experience, is that if you have a very good GMAT score, chances are you're going to get higher funding in terms of scholarships or fellowships or whatever it is that you need to pursue your education. Yeah, so I feel like there are a lot of opportunities for people to further their education here, and people should do it.
The reason why I asked this question, Rufaro, is that, I was looking at my master's program today, and, it costs 53 Canadian dollars, right? Just for 1 year. It's a 1 year professional master's, Master of Food and Resource Economics at the University of British Columbia. And then you add other expenses like, living expenses and how many people can then afford. But
Yeah,
I've seen that there's a lot of funding like scholarships. In the previous podcast, I actually invited someone who started what is called the Scholarship Cafe. He takes time, collating this information and supporting people because what I've seen is most people they just don't have access to the information. Like, oh,
yeah,
there's a scholarship that is there. There's the funding, and I'm sure you navigated through that road. And
yeah,
maybe
absolutely.
you can speak to that maybe towards the end. Now, as you know, on this podcast, we talk about personal finance, investing, and career in. You mentioned, and I follow you, quite closely on social media. You post a lot about stuff that is happening in Zimbabwe.
Yeah.
I'm curious to hear about, like some investment opportunities in Zimbabwe, particularly in the stock markets or maybe in whatever sectors. What are the investment opportunities that you see in Zimbabwe? And just to be clear, this is not investment advice. It's just me and Faro, sharing our personal views.
Yeah. Look, I think I'll take it from the start. You
Yes.
know how I started investing on the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange.
Yes.
So it's a beautiful story, and sometimes I forget about it. So I'm in my first year at NAST,
Yes.
and for the first time, there's a company that wants to develop a platform that allows people to trade stock remotely.
Yes.
So they come to NAST and they call us the finance people to the room,
Yes.
and they're telling us about the stock market.
Yes.
And one guy who was part of that team asks a question that who amongst you guys trade on the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange?
I'm like, what?
And nobody confirmed. Then he went on to ask, why don't you guys trade on the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange? And the guy who was sitting next to me answered that because we don't have money.
Yes.
And he asked, how much do you need to start investing on the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange?
How much do you think you need?
That's when I realized that it wasn't really about,
Yes.
we just didn't know, we just didn't care. So fortunately for us, we became part of the pilot team that had to trade on the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange, testing this system.
Yes.
Yeah, so that was in 2018.
Yes.
So I think that's when my investment journey on the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange started. And since then, I think I would like to believe that I've helped over 100 people start their investment journey on the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange.
I'll follow up about that, Rufaro.
Yeah. So I've helped people. So when I was now in my final year, I'd already started investing on the stock market before my final year. When it was an opportunity for me to go for attachment.
Internship here in North America, right?
Yeah, internship. I had two options. One was to work for a bank, and at that time I felt that if I work for a bank, being somebody who studied finance, I'll get the relevant experience that I wanted. And the other option was to work for the United Nations. But I was not going to get the finance experience that I wanted. I was going to work in accounting, but the money was very good. So I said to myself, I'm going to go with the UN internship.
Yes.
So I went for the UN internship. And what I told myself is that to offset the finance experience that I've forgone, I will study about everything that's happening in the economy so that I will offset that. Yeah, so I've been following the markets, I think for quite some time now since then. So when I was now in my final year, there was a challenge that was done by one of the stockbrokers. And I participated in the challenge. I won. And they gave me some money, and I boosted my portfolio. Yeah, so that's the journey that's been there. But also, what I then realized is that when I was at school, there were things that I thought about the stock market,
Yes.
which I found out was different to reality when I then started working. Remember, I worked as an equity research analyst for a stockbroking firm. I was now closer to the market.
Yes.
So I'll tell you, when I was still picking my stocks at school, I would buy some penny stocks. I remember at one point I had Truworths in my portfolio. I had art. I had some of the smaller companies. But what I then realized is that at the end of the day, what moves the market is demand and supply. Everything that we do at the end of the day results in demand and supply. And what makes the share price go up is the demand for that company. And the unfortunate thing with the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange specifically is that most of the share price increase is derived from money that is looking for somewhere to go.
Okay.
So if there is ZWL liquidity, it's now ZIG. If there is ZIG liquidity, it's looking for a few counters to get into. So you know that it's looking to get into Econet, it's looking to get into Delta. Those two mostly. It can then stretch to get into used to be InScore, EcoCash, the top 10. But mostly it's Econet and Delta. So let's say for example, I've actually realized that Star Africa is undervalued. I've
Yes,
done my numbers, and
yes.
Star Africa
Done your
is
research.
undervalued for sure, at least according to what I've done. Chances are the bulk of money never gets into Star Africa. Uh, for me to realize the difference between what I've calculated as my intrinsic value and where the stock is. So I think it's something that you probably don't see on other exchanges, but the fact that money is a few liquid, and the reason why it goes to these counters is because those are the counters that are liquid enough
Yes.
to hold and to sustain the amount of zig that will be coming into the market. So you end up realizing that
Yes.
research and analysis and everything, the reward on that is lower than somebody who just comes and say, you know what, I'm going to buy Econet, I'm going to buy Delta, and I'm just going to wait for the market. Yeah.
Dear viewer, thank you so much for tuning in to this podcast. I really appreciate you tuning in. But did you know that only 10% of all the people who watch this podcast are subscribed? So if you're one of those people who are not subscribed, I highly encourage you to subscribe so that you can get notification when I post new podcast and other content on personal finance and investing. In return, I promise you one thing. I will bring in guests from different parts of the world who have different experiences in personal finance, investing, and from different career walks. Now, the goal is to inspire you and to have these people in conversation with me share their experiences so that we can both learn from each other. If you have any questions, you can also put them on the comments so that we can respond to your comments. I hope you enjoy this episode. Have a wonderful time and may the markets be with you.
Yeah.
You know, you have actually answered in a very brilliant way something that I was struggling to understand. You know, I mostly trade and invest in the US and Canadian stock market, and I don't claim to be a specialist in the Zimbabwean Stock Exchange. I remember I invested 300 US dollars equivalents. I posted it on my social media.
Yeah.
And right now it's almost like $100. And so when I look at it, for me, I was kind of like just, testing and just, seeing. And what I noticed is that, in terms of dividends, there are actually companies that pay, good dividends. So let's say if you have, decent amount, you can actually, make some money even in US dollar terms in dividends, right? But in terms of the share appreciation, so this is how money and wealth is created. Let's say you buy a share, let's say for there's this stock that is popular now, Nvidia. Let's say you buy it at maybe $90 and then it goes to 150, right? So you then make money that way.
Yeah.
So I find it interesting that you mentioned that. So a lot of people now, I see like they trade other stocks and stuff like that. And each time that I go on the platform that I use at the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange, there's no demand. Like, for example, the other time I was looking at BAT, British American Tobacco,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it
You
is,
you couldn't find the share.
yeah, like I could see, and you can see I use this platform, C-Trade, and then you
Yeah.
can see the demand and supply. So this is how the market moves, like you explained. There's the market structure, there's demand and supply. Supply, these are the, let's say, institutions, there are algorithms, like you're talking of billions in the US and Canadian stock markets that, bid price. So either they sell or they buy, right? And also retail investors. So it depends on the ones who are in control. For
Yeah.
example, if it's the bulls, like if like the bulls are in control, in other words, they can bid, the price up. They can just put orders to say buy at market price, and then that can push the price up. You can see the candle going bum boom.
Yeah.
Then if the sellers, there's a certain level that they want to liquidate, they can then, sell at a market order and then push that price down. So that's how the price moves. And in that process, for me, when I'm trading, I look at that volatility. So I found it to be very interesting. So the liquidity at the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange is very low. I was looking at the Victoria Stock Exchange. So I'm curious now, when you're working as an analyst. So does that mean, and I mean, this is now you left that organization and you are not speaking on their behalf for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, so how did you place the trades? Because I remember there was a time then when I heard that, there was no online brokerage, so you would have to call or place an order, and then the broker would then place the trade, exit, or enter into. How did?
Yeah. Yes, back in the day, and I need to classify something before I answer. So
Yeah.
I was more on the analysis part.
Okay.
So basically, with equity research, you have analysts, and their job is to read the market, follow companies, write reports, make recommendations. Then there is the sales and trading team.
Yes.
These are the guys who actually execute the trades. These are the guys who are talking to the buy side guys, the asset managers, the guys who have the money who want to buy the shares or sell the shares. So I was more on the research and analysis. I remember at some point I was writing my exams so that I can end up becoming a broker. And funny enough, I think I've written 2 of those exams. So I was on my way to become a broker. But to answer your question more directly, yes, there was a time where people would actually go to the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange and they would be literally saying, I have an order for 1 million Econet shares. Then somebody says, I want them at this price. Then they close off the deal. But right now, everything is now automated. So yeah, it's now just a click on they call it the ATS, the automated trading system, where they do that. And it sort of like mirrors what you as a retail investor have on your C-Trade or ZSE Direct platform.
Yes.
Yeah. You also mentioned something that I feel like I should touch on, which is to do with dividends.
Yeah.
So you're right. I think at the moment, companies in Zimbabwe are issuing very juicy dividends. And
US.
And the interesting thing about this is some of them are even listed on the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange. So basically, you are buying a company in local currency, and you are being given USD dividends. So if you do the conversion, you can find out that probably the dividend yield is ranging around 10%. So basically, when we're talking about dividend yield, we're saying how much you've been given as dividends divided by the share price.
Yes.
So if dividend yield is 10%,
Yes.
basically, it's so good. It means that if you, assuming that the company will continue to do that, in the next 10 years, you'd have recouped all your money just through the dividends.
Yes.
Yeah, that's extremely good.
Yes.
And it's a trend that we are seeing with companies listed on the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange. But still, you might, like you rightly say, you might realize that their share prices are not going up,
Yes.
because what drives the share price on the ZSE,
Yes.
in my opinion, is liquidity.
Yes, liquidity.
So I remember at some point, I had shares in First Capital Bank, and First Capital Bank had just released its results, and I was looking at their balance sheet. So basically, what it meant, they had what we call a price to book value, which was greater than 1, which meant their market capitalization on the market was lower than what they had as the equity on their balance sheet. And I was like, how does this happen? But I now understand how the market works. It's all about liquidity, which counters are liquid. That's where the money goes. Those are the counters that are likely to appreciate the most. Yeah.
This is very interesting. So now I want to maybe move on to make it a little bit simpler. So walk me, let's say if someone just wants to start investing, how much do you think maybe someone, needs to start, and how does the process work in uh s- similar terms as much as you can?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I think investing in Zimbabwe is it's very easy, especially if you're somebody who's already in Zimbabwe. I think all your ID and a bank account, yeah, then you can create your account
That is
because
a brokerage account, and there are different accounts, different names, right?
yeah. But that's the technicality part of it. As a retail investor, you don't even need to understand what's happening at the back. As a retail investor, you can just go onto your computer and you can go on ZSC Direct or C Trade and you can create your account. You have your ID, you have your account number.
Loaded.
So yes, at the back end, you have a CSD or an EDS account that's created where your shares get into. But you don't need to understand all that.
Okay.
You can literally start trading tomorrow. If you go, you open your account, you provide the details, you deposit the amount that is needed. I think you can even deposit using your EcoCash. Uh, it's just that these days you can't withdraw using your EcoCash because there was a limit that was put. I think there was a law that was put there which makes it difficult. But you can deposit using your EcoCash and you can go on the board and
Yes.
you wait when the market opens at 9:30. You can go on the board and you can start buying your shares. Because you have a broker, but you might not even need to talk to your broker, because
Yes.
the moment you place your trade,
Yes.
automatically the broker forwards that trade to the ATS, and you can buy your shares and you can sell your shares. Yeah,
Yeah.
so I think it's a very very simple. I always told people who I helped open their accounts is as simple as opening a Facebook account. If you have ever opened a Facebook account,
Yes.
you can open an account to start trading shares on the market.
Rufaro, I'm gonna push back a little bit because I talk to people and it keeps on surprises me, and I don't mean this disrespectively. You and I, you have a master's in in economics,
Financial economics. Yeah,
financial economics. I've several master's degrees and all this. We're doing CFA, so it may seem to be easy. So the reason why I was trying to kind of like, so that at least we can in simple terms as we can, is maybe to just simplify it. For example, when I opened my account, and thank you for answering that. That was very helpful, Rufaro.
yeah,
Um, I remember the minimum amount to open, I use what is known, like Quest Trade. That's the broker that I use. So I funded my account. I started with $300, Canadian dollars. But the reason usually they want $1,000. So it was my first time. So I was a little bit nervous to say, how does this really work? So I had to call them and say, hey, I'm not really sure I can trust you guys. Can I just start with $300? They said, okay, sure. Let's adjust that for you. And to cut a long story short, I remember my first share, I think it was Twitter at that time, it was listed publicly. And I bought Apple just for me, it was
for the
more.
few.
Yes, I felt like how I'm owning a piece of, Apple and Twitter, right? Without even understanding the valuation. So that was back then in 2020. So what you need basically is you need a platform to trade or to buy or to sell the shares, and then you need to fund your account. But more importantly, like I've been trying to explain on my threads on social media, is that it's very helpful to understand the things that you're investing in. And what I'm learning is the way that I trade and invest in the US and Canadian stock market, it's very different. I'm not really active on the Zimbabwean Stock Exchange. So that's why I was like, I'm so excited to have you here. And you mentioned something that is really pivotal that, because I remember I even hired someone to do research for this, like financials and all this for these stocks. And I have a whole list, but then they don't move the shares. So I was wondering. So actually, when
Yeah,
we
yeah, 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 yeah,
I was like,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
oh, now this makes sense. The way that I value companies here, if I
Yeah.
carry that knowledge and just not back test or front test my I can lose money, right? Like I told you that I lost now, I mean, I didn't sell. I mean, for me, it was like 300 US dollars equivalents. Now it's like 100. But it's now because the dividends are actually,
coming through.
right? So that's very interesting.
Yeah, it is. And one thing that I want to highlight there, Isaac, is that the reason why it happens like that in Zimbabwe is because um, the stock market, the ZSE specifically, has been viewed as a hedge against the currency depreciation or
Okay.
inflation. So anyone who has exposure to local currency,
Yes.
instead of keeping it in a bank or keeping it or going to the black market to buy forex, the legal route that you have to sort of like preserve it against the currency depreciation, at least during the ZWL days before the ZIG, was to go through the stock market.
Yes.
So if if you have significant amount of money and you're going to the stock market,
Yes.
do you want to buy a share that rarely trades? No, you don't want, because the moment you want to exit, it will be difficult for you to exit.
Yes.
So research and analysis hasn't been valued that much
Yeah.
because of this thing. But I believe if the currency is to stabilize,
Yes.
eventually you will see the market responding to the fundamentals. But at
Okay.
the moment, the, the only fundamental which is important, especially with the currency, is liquidity. As long as it's liquid enough to absorb uh, those cash flows, yeah.
Yeah, even when I do my trading in Canada and in the US, I also like to trade the stocks that really have high liquidity. I like to trade exchange traded funds like SPY and stocks like Nvidia, because they are, like billions, sometimes
Yeah.
millions in a day. So what happens is that, you want to get in and get out because sometimes I'm in a trade for 10 seconds or 1 minute. Sometimes I do swing trade. That means I buy and hold maybe for a day or 2 days or weeks. So that's very interesting. And
Yeah.
I seem to get the sense that so mostly when you were kind of like like participating in the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange, are you more of a trader than an investor?
Yeah, there's a joke around the stock market that says uh, everyone is a long-term investor until the market starts coming off.
Yes.
So people like to say, ah, no, I'm a long-term investor,
Yes.
and I don't know, they seem to have tarnished trading, because
Yes.
I see a lot of people like to align with long-term investing.
Yes.
If you ask anyone that question,
Yes.
but 9 out of 10 people will tell you that no, I'm a long-term investor. I'm looking at the fundamentals. And sometimes you just want to make a quick buck and go.
Oh,
So
yes.
I think I'm both. There are shares that I've been holding for the longest.
Yes.
There are shares that I've realized that no, I just made a mistake.
Yes.
I need to move on. But perhaps something that I need to point out, especially with relation to ZSE, that limits trading, is that there is something called a T+3 trading cycle.
Yeah.
So it means if I sell my shares today, I
Yes.
have to wait for 3 working days before I get my money.
Yeah.
So
FT+1 now.
there is now T+1.
Yes.
Yeah, so that limits your trading. And I know that the ZSE is working to get these things reduced. They also want interday trading, things like that. But at the moment, those things are not available to traders, market participants on the ZSE. So it's sort of like so if you buy something today, you have to wait. Yeah.
Yes. And here in Canada, what I do, I have a margin account. So a margin account, usually what it does is like, let's say I have, for my other account, let's say the tax-free savings account. That's something that is very important. In Canada, they are registered accounts. So that means you can have tax-free savings account. I'm sure in Zimbabwe and other advanced countries, they are there, but they have different names. So let's say I have, let's say 20,000 in my tax-free savings account. That means I can borrow and I don't encourage it at all. I can borrow on those shares. Maybe I can get maybe 3 times leverage, or in Canada, they are conservative. Maybe they could give me an extra $10,000. So what that means is on my margin account, I can now buy shares equivalent, maybe to 10,000. So, but what some people do is like for the margin account, they just, if they want to make a quick trade, they get in and they get out. You take the profit or you take the loss, and that's it,
And
right?
you're out.
And you're out. But the problem with leverage is you get a margin call because sometimes the market can drop unexpectedly, right? And what then happens is when it drops, then it's like you have security. You go and to the bank, you want to borrow on your house or on an asset, right? If they drop, then the broker will then say, well, you have to sell the
The security to
yeah.
cover up your
Yes, but the problem is it's now at the bottom, so you lose, and then you have to pay the interest. So for me, when I trade, I use the margin account. I only trade on cash. Thank you so much for tuning into this podcast. I started this podcast with the goal to share insights on personal finance, investing, and career insights. But did you know that out of all the people who tune in on this podcast, and by the way, I appreciate you, all of you, only 10% are subscribed. So if you are one of those people who are not subscribed, I highly encourage you to subscribe so that when I post content in the future, you get notification, and also this podcast can grow. In return, I will bring in guests from different parts of the world who are successful in their own rights. The goal is to share their personal experiences on personal finance, investing, and also career insights. That way, we can also learn from each other through our conversations. I hope you enjoy yet another podcast at Streetwise Economics. Have a wonderful time and may the markets be with you. Thank you again, dear viewer.